Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 8, Input Validation. I'm your professor, Dr. English Dowdell. So let me start by asking you a question. Have you ever typed something into a website form and then received an error message? Or maybe you were signing up for an account and entering your phone number without the area code. Or maybe you tried to create a password that was too short, or maybe you accidentally left a field blank and then click submit, only to see like this big red error message pop up. So I want you to think about that for a second. What actually happened? Did the website let you through anyway? Probably not, okay? Most likely, it told you that your input wasn't acceptable, and it asked you to fix it. Now that process is called input validation. So in this module, we're going to focus on protecting our programs through input validation. Now, by the end of this recorded lecture, you should be able to explain why input validation is essential, design logic to check user input, and then use repetition structures like loops, to make sure that invalid input doesn't sneak past any of our programs. So let's start with the why. Why does input validation matter so much? So imagine you're designing a program that asks a user to enter their age. And if the user types 200, is that valid? No, it's not a realistic human age. Now, what about if they type the word banana? That's not even a number at all. If you don't validate that input, your program might crash, or worse, it might continue to produce incorrect results with nonsense data. So here's three main reasons input validation is going to be essential. One, in preventing errors. Now, without validation, your program may break, when it encounters unexpected input. So for example, dividing by 0 or using letters where numbers are required or storing data in the wrong place. The second one is protecting security. Now, bad input can be a doorway to security risks. So, for example, like hackers might deliberately enter strange characters to break into the system. Validation is going to help protect against this. And then third, improving user experience. Think about when you mistype something on Amazon or Netflix. The website tells you right away, that's not valid, please try again. That's validation at work, and it prevents frustration later on. So I want you to take a moment, think about, have you ever entered like incorrect data into a website? What happened? Did it tell you right away, or did it accept the bad input and then cause problems later? Okay, so how do we actually validate input? So let's break it down. So input validation usually involves 3 steps. One is to prompt the user for input. The second is to check the input, and make sure that it meets, whatever the rules are. And then the third is, if it's not valid, to repeat the prompt until it is valid. So this is where loops come in. If the input is invalid, we don't just give up. We loop back and we ask again. So let's walk through, a really kind of simple example in pseudocode. Okay, so the prompt is we want them to enter a number greater than 0. Okay, so they input the number, and then this is the loop that we're going to be using to check the input. So while the number is less than or equal to 0, which doesn't meet our criteria, then we're going to display that is not valid. Please try again, and then they'll have to input the number again. Okay, so this keeps repeating, until this is no longer true. Okay, and then when this is no longer true, then they exit that while. So end while, and then it displays you entered a valid number and then whatever that number is. So this is, like I said, this is that loop. Okay, so what's happening here, again, the user is asking for a number. And if they enter something that's less than or equal to 0, the program says it's not valid, and it's going to ask them again. Okay, and again, remember, this is going to continue until the user finally enters a number that's greater than 0. Now notice how we use the while loop. Okay, that's one of the most common ways to handle input validation. Okay, now let's practice thinking about validation rules for different scenarios. And these are going to be very similar to the assignment choices that you're given this week. So you can use these as a guide for the assignment. Okay, so our first scenario is age entry. Okay, the rule is that it's only going to accept whole numbers between 1 and 120. So that means invalid examples would be what? A -5, because that doesn't fit between 1 and 20, 200, because that's greater than 120, or actually the word 20. So your pseudocode should look like this. Okay, so the prompt is enter your age 1 through 120. Okay, so the input is age, and then here's that while loop statement. Okay, so while age is less than 1, okay, because it doesn't fall between 1 and 20, or age is greater than 120, then we're going to display invalid age and ask them to please enter a number between 1 and 20. So we're asking them, we're repeating it and asking them for another input. Okay, and then of course they'll input the age, and this will keep running until this is no longer true. Okay, this is no longer true. Okay, so here's another one. Okay, so this one is related to zip code. So the rule is that it must be exactly 5 digits. Okay, so that means that invalid examples would be what? 1, 2, 3, because that's not 5 digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, definitely greater than 5 digits, or the string hello. Okay, so let's see what the pseudocode would look like. So the prompt is that we enter your 5-digit, we ask them to enter their 5-digit zip code. They input the zip code, okay? And again, we keep looping, okay, until it's exactly 5 digits. So here's our test. We're saying, wow, the length of the zip code is not equal to 5, or the zip code contains non-digit characters. That would take care of that hello. We're going to display the message invalid zip code. Please enter exactly 5 digits. And then, of course, they'll input the zip code again, and then it'll go and it'll check it again, and it'll keep checking it until this is no longer true. Okay? And then for this one, once it's no longer true and we exit that while loop, then we'll display you entered a valid zip code and then display the zip code. Okay, so you're going to have ones that are going to be similar to this in the assignment. So, make note of these. Okay, so here's another one. Okay, this one is for like a password setup. Okay, so the rule is they have to at least enter 8 characters, at least 8 characters, okay? It can be greater than 8, but at least 8 characters. So invalid examples would be the word cat, okay, because that's only 3 characters, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is not just a bad password, but it's also less than 8 characters. Okay, so here's our prompt. Here's our pseudocode. Our prompt is enter a password at least 8 characters. So they enter the password, and then again, we keep looping, okay, until it has at least 8 passwords. So while the length of password is less than 8, okay, because it just has to be 8 or more, okay, we're going to display password too short. Please enter at least 8 characters, and then they'll enter another password, and then we'll keep looping until this statement is no longer true. Once this statement is no longer true, again, we're going to exit out of this while loop, okay, by saying end loop, and then we're going to display password accepted. Okay, make sense? Okay, so let's do one more. This one is a menu selection, okay? And the rule is that users must choose 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so invalid examples would be choosing 0, entering 4, or entering the word banana. Okay, so here's our pseudocode. So the prompt is that we enter a menu option 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so they input their choice, and then again, we keep looping, okay, until the choice is one of the valid options. So while choice is not equal to 1, and choice is not equal to 2, and choice is not equal to 3, we're going to display invalid option. Please enter 1, 2, or 3. And then they'll enter their choice again, and then we'll keep looping until this while statement here, this is no longer true. Once this is no longer true, again, we exit out, and then we're going to display use selected option and then show them what they selected. Okay. So again, you're going to, keep doing this, use these examples, and you'll keep looping until it meets whatever that rule is. It meets whatever that particular criteria is. Okay. Now, as you see here, just kind of a note here, we can use ands and ors and things like that, to combine rules, like if we have multiple rules and things like that, just to kind of note that. Now, I want to slow down a little bit, and I want you to look carefully at how loops help with validation. Now, I've been showing you the different loops, within the scenarios. Now, there's two main types of loops that we can use. Okay, we can do the while loop. Okay, and what this does is it's going to check the condition before running the body. Okay, so here it is. Here we're saying we're checking if the input is invalid. Okay, and then we're going to you know, run the body. Okay, and then we'll end it. So it's checking first. Okay, so it's looking, it's checking this, and then it's running. Okay, this is like standing at the door and saying, I won't let you through until you meet the requirements. Okay, so we're not going to run this body until it meets these requirements. Okay, so the requirement is if the input is invalid, if it meets that requirement, then we're going to run the body. We're going to let them in the door. Okay. Now, the do while loop, this always runs at least once and then checks after. Okay, so we say do, we run the body, okay, and then we check after. Okay, then we check after we run the body, then we check, if the input is invalid. Okay, so this is like letting someone try the door, but if they fail, then you immediately send them back to try it again. So you have to kind of think about as far as the logic. Do you need to check it first before you perform some kind of action, or do you need to perform some kind of action and then check it? Now, input validation usually involves Boolean logic. That's just a fancy term for conditions that are true or false. Okay, so for example, if age is less than 1 or age is greater than 120, that's a Boolean expression. Is password length less than 8? Again, that's a Boolean expression. Okay. Now, like I mentioned before, we can also use ands and ors, like if we need to combine rules. Okay, so for example, a zip code must be 5 digits and all characters must be numbers. Boolean logic, it gives us the power to create like very specific rules. Now, for those that are doing the optional Python enrichment for extra credit, here's a very simple program that validates the menu input. So you can kind of apply this. Think about, once you do your pseudocode, think about how you can apply this to your Python, okay? So of course the choice here, the input, This is what we're asking. That's our prompt. Okay, and then while choice is not in 1, 2, or 3, then we're going to print invalid choice, try again. And then they're going to have to, again, enter their choice, 1, 2, or 3. And we're going to keep doing this. So notice the loop keeps asking until the user gives valid input, the same that we did, the same logic that we did with the pseudocode. And then once they put the right thing in there, once it doesn't meet this criteria any longer, once the choice is not in, while it's not in that, then we'll go ahead and we'll print what they selected. Again, this is exactly, if you look back at the pseudocode that I provided for the menu, this is exactly like that, except it's written in Python. So you can kind of use this or use something similar to this if you choose to do the optional Python enrichment for extra credit. Okay, so one of the assignments this week, you've got a discussion post as well, but you also have an assignment this week is to write pseudocode that validates input. Okay, so you're going to pick one of the 4 scenarios, and the scenarios will be age, zip code, password, or menu selection, very similar to what I've already showed you. Okay, and I want you to remember the requirements. You're going to use a loop. Okay, use Boolean logic as I did in the scenarios, and then I want you to include comments, okay, so that it's clear what's happening as I did in some of those scenarios. So basically, you're going to pick a scenario, you're going to prompt for input, okay, you're going to check the rules with a Boolean logic, you're going to loop until it's valid, okay, and then you're going to make sure that you add comments. Now, I want to emphasize, don't worry about making it perfect. I want you to focus on making your pseudocode clear and easy to follow. If I can read your steps and understand your logic, then your job is done. Now, also this week, you've got your first milestone for the course project. Now, this milestone is called Requirements and Problem Analysis, and the purpose is to clearly describe what the system needs to do before we actually start designing it. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to restate the scenario. Okay, so there's going to be this short video message from Marley Nope, who's the director of the Pawnee Community Center. She's going to explain to you what the Community Center registration system is all about. Okay, then in your own words, you're going to restate what the project is. Okay, the next step is you're going to identify the main features. So the system should allow people to register for classes, cancel registrations, view class schedules. All of this is going to be collected when you listen to the video. Okay, we need to collect and identify what these main features are. Okay, then I want you to describe the users. So you're going to think about the different types of people that will use the system. Okay, she'll talk to you about that. She's going to mention those to you. Then I want you to create a high-level IPO chart. That means listing the input, what data goes in. This could be like the participant's name, class IDs, cancellation requests, whatever you deem from the video. Okay. The P part is processing, of course, what the system does, with that data. Does it store it? Does it update it? Does it check for conflicts? Things like that. Okay, think about how it's going to process that data. And then what's going to be the output? What's going to actually come out? Are you going to send confirmation messages? You're going to update schedules? What actually is going to come out? What's going to be the output? Now, for this milestone, your submission should include a written description of the problem and the people that will use the system. Okay, that's the scenario, and with the main functions and the system user. And then you should include a high-level IPO chart that shows input, processing, and outputs. Now, this is going to set the foundation for your project. So if you get these requirements right, then the rest of the project is going to be a lot easier. Okay, so to wrap it up, input validation is about making sure problems only accept correct and expected data. we're going to use loops to keep asking until we get something valid. And remember, Boolean logic lets us create specific rules. Now, your assignment's going to give you practice writing pseudocode to validate input. And don't forget, you're also going to be working on your first milestone where you're going to restate the problem or the project requirements and build this high-level IPO chart. Okay, so what's next after watching this video? I would like for you to read Chapter 7 in your textbook. You have a discussion post that talks about like what happens when you enter wrong data into the website. Make sure that you respond to your peers. You've got an assignment, and then again, like I say, you've got milestone 1 that you're going to be doing. So as you go through this week, I wanted you to keep a question in mind. If you were designing a program, how would you protect it from bad input? That's what I want you to focus on, okay? Protecting your program from bad or inaccurate input, okay? So that's it for this lecture. Have a good week, and I'll see you on the discussion board.